Well, good evening, folks. I'm so glad you're here. I have spent the last couple days. Well, that's a lie. So I spent the last couple days editing video, but I've literally spent years thinking about this prospect. I decided to start a series, Ops or Aliens, a while ago. And I decided I was going to put the UFO legacy program, the said UFO legacy program, in that video as part of kind of the complete story of are we dealing with psychological operations or actual extraterrestrials or both? I think it's still up in the air at this point, unfortunately. So this portion is really episode 1 of that series. And this is on the Legacy UFO program. And I'm not starting at the beginning. I'm not starting at the beginning of the program because, one, we could argue that. We could all argue that till our faces turn blue and the dogs come home. And two, that story's been told 500 million times. What I wanted to tell is the story that's affecting us right now. And to me, the story that's affecting us right now is the reason that Intel and the military are able to operate against their own citizens goes back about 15 years to 9/11. 9/11 is a tough one for me because that's literally why I went into the service. I was 21, right? Didn't join after high school. I wanted to go and see the world. I was in a different part of the country exploring. 9/11 happened. I felt the call and I joined up. So I'm going to let y'all know this video is going to touch on 9/11 because ultimately 9/11 resulted in the Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act gave our intelligence officials license to bury and black fund anything they wanted to as long as they put the word terrorism on it. They're even doing it right now with those Venezuelan boats, calling drug dealers terrorists. Because when you call them terrorists, all of a sudden the rules change. And basically there are no rules. Guantanamo is still open, folks, if you haven't noticed. 9/11 was the spark that pushed the UFO legacy programs not only further into the black and further out of sight, but it also gave them legitimate protections. So we already had this group that was operating in the dark with very little oversight. No oversight, basically, from the Congress. No oversight from the Gang of Eight. Once the Patriot Act happens, it essentially gives them carte blanche. We're going to take a look at that. How 9/11 happened, the Patriot Act happened, and then we're going to take a look at some of the key players that Grush has named. To start out with, we have Director of National Intelligence James Clapper and his right-hand woman, Stephanie O'Sullivan. Clapper was sworn in as DNI in 2010, Sullivan very closely thereafter. And we're going to take a look at a couple of statements they made during their confirmation hearings. We're also going to talk about how when the Patriot Act happened, it gave us the DNI. And if you take all of the intelligence companies, all of the intelligence agencies that are out there and put them under the control of one individual, that's the DNI. So it used to be the CIA director or the FBI director was arguably, the most powerful man in the country, maybe the world, because of the information they can control. The DNI took that to the next level, right? Because the DNI controls it all, can see it all, can cross-jointly facilitate operations. Didn't have that kind of carte blanche before. Which means, again, that these programs that were already operating in the black, that were already hard to figure out if they even existed, just got a boost of secrecy and another layer of protection from any kind of accountability. Now, I know I've heard the arguments. We just need to give the legacy people amnesty. If you want to know anything, just give them amnesty. And I get that argument. But we don't know what they did yet. Like, if they did some super nasty shit to people, I'm not ready and I'm not prepared to give them amnesty. So I just can't get on board with that. But we're going to start this video. And as I said, this starts at 9/11. This starts when the gathering, collection, analyzation, distribution of data in this country completely changed. And you're going to hear one of David Grush's named gatekeepers. No, I apologize. One of George Knapp's named gatekeeper, the only gatekeeper George Knapp named, Glenn Gaffney, speak on intelligence back in 2008. How they didn't even need secret clearance anymore. There's so much information available on the public forums. The data collection has become that much easier. We're giving it to them. And all they have to do is take it and analyze it. So I'm going to look at his perspective on that. And again, that was in 2008. But to start out, it started at 9/11. So be aware. Please be prepared. If you're triggered by scenes of 9/11, it's only for the first few minutes, but there are a few scenes there. Just to warn you before we get going. I hope you enjoy it. I will chime in here and there as we're watching the video.
heard it, and because I was just like standing there pretty much looking out the window, I didn't see what caused it or if there was an impact.
So you have no idea right now?
There's another one. Another plane just hit. Right, oh my God, another plane has just hit. It hit another building, flew right into the middle of it.
All right, take one and two, one. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the two towers. Debris continues to fall and to rain on the people below. There are people hanging from the windows 90 stories up, and a number of bodies have actually hit the pavement. Take two and two, one. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us.
In fact, you were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have...
Oh my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my...
This is just the beginning of what they're facing. And we need masks. We need TB masks. Holy shit! What is it?
It just went down.
What just went down?
World Trade 7.
It did go down before.
No, 7. Number 7.
Oh my God!
The committee has called this hearing today to discuss with government officials and outside experts and civil libertarians the provisions of S. 1448, the Intelligence to Prevent Terrorism Act of 2001. We must have a centralized authority for managing the intelligence components of that counterterrorism policy. It should have a Senate-confirmed director so that he will have the stature appropriate for the position, and should have budget authority over that portion of the various agencies' budgets which relate to counterterrorism. And finally, the director should examine the overall structure of the United States government to deal with terrorism, prevention and response, and if necessary, recommend restructuring or merging of agencies and functions. Updating the laws governing electronic surveillance to collect foreign intelligence so as to improve collection against international terrorist targets, and enhancing the ability of law enforcement and the intelligence agencies to share critical information relating to plans and intentions of terrorists. My colleagues and I are committed to the substance of these provisions because we believe that they enhance intelligence collection without unreasonably diminishing our civil liberties.
After 9/11, the rules changed. The USA Patriot Act wasn't written for UFOs or legacy programs or the long shadow of Cold War secrets. What it created was something far more useful: legal gravity. A framework where secrecy naturally collapsed inward, where anything labeled national security could be pulled deeper, tighter, and further from daylight. James Clapper understood this better than most. By the time he reached the Director of National Intelligence, Clapper wasn't just managing intelligence streams. He was managing risk. Not the risk of foreign adversaries, but the risk of exposure. The kind that doesn't show up on threat matrices. The kind that ends careers, unravels programs, and raises questions no one in government ever wants to answer publicly. Legacy programs already existed. Deep ones, fragmented, buried under decades of compartmentalization. But the post-9/11 world offered an opportunity. Reclassification, through relevance. Counterterrorism became the universal solvent. Anything could be folded into it. Advanced sensors, exotic materials research, aerospace anomalies, intelligence collection methods whose origins could not be explained without revealing too much. The Patriot Act didn't need to mention special access programs by name. It simply removed the friction. It allowed information to move just enough between agencies while remaining invisible to everyone else. At the collection level, Glenn Gaffney played his part quietly. Open source intelligence was no longer just newspapers and broadcasts. It was global telemetry, commercial satellite imagery, academic papers, foreign media, civilian radar data, public signals that could be harvested, fused, and analyzed, then quietly cross-referenced against classified streams. When something strange appeared in the data, it didn't need to be labeled extraordinary. It only needed to be labeled ambiguous. Ambiguity is the safest classification of all. At the DNI's office, Stephanie O'Sullivan handled the machinery, day-to-day operations, budget flows, oversight interfaces. She didn't need to know every detail of every compartment. She needed to know how to keep the system stable. The Patriot Act helped here too. Fewer questions, fewer objections, fewer members of Congress willing to push back when the phrase sources and methods was invoked, and it always was. Somewhere below the visible layers, scientists like Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff operated in a different world entirely. One where the questions were not political, but technical. Where data didn't care about narratives. Where observations didn't fit comfortably inside known frameworks. Their work didn't need public validation. In fact, public validation could have been dangerous. Better to keep it theoretical, compartmented, passed verbally, cited obliquely, folded into contractor reports, and buried inside defense authorizations that no one outside a closed room would ever read. The Patriot Act didn't create a conspiracy. It created conditions. Conditions where secrecy was rewarded. Where overclassification was safer than transparency. Where legacy programs didn't need to be dismantled. They only needed to be rejustified under a new threat model. Terrorism. Asymmetric warfare. Strategic surprise. And if, along the way, analogous technologies or unexplained craft were absorbed into the system, classified not because of what they were, but because of what they might imply, that meant the system was working exactly as designed. By the time anyone thought to look back, the trail was gone. Not erased, just buried beneath layers of lawful secrecy, emergency authority, and institutional inertia, wrapped tightly in the language of national defense and sealed with a signature that read, "Approved in the interest of security."
We'll hear from Glenn Gaffney, our Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Collection, about his vision for the new universe of open source information.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to this great conference. I heard nothing but wonderful things about last year's conference and was excited to have the opportunity to come and speak, to meet you all here today. It is important to be here. It's important because of the critical nature of open source in this intelligence enterprise, and it's important for the opportunity that it represents in terms of what open source can do for the future of the intelligence enterprise. Glenn, what's the future of collection? Where are we going? Not where we're going with HUMINT, not where we're going with SIGINT, not where we're going with our space program or any other aspect of the program. We're going to work all those things, and we do all those things, and we do them very well. But it's a broader question, and it's a question that comes to the DNI. What is the future of collection? And I thought, well, as the Deputy Director for Collection, I probably ought to ponder on that for a little bit. And so in thinking through it, I came up with what amounts to 2 words: integrated performance. We are an incredibly well-resourced intelligence enterprise. We use that enterprise and optimize that enterprise, and have been doing so for many years with great effect against some of the most pressing challenges that this nation and our allies face. We don't own the technological playing field like we once did. It's not there for us the way that it was there for us before. It's there more from a collaborative and interactive nature, but it contributes, that lack of owning that technological playing field creates a more level playing field across the board. What could argued be the cost per bit of information globally goes down weekly. Add to that the cost of entry into the intelligence business has gone down dramatically. A laptop and a modem, and you're in the game. And so if we think of cost per bit going down, not owning the technological playing field, lower cost of entry into the business, we see a more leveling of the playing field, a leveling of the playing field relative to the intelligence enterprise and those who would do us harm. As the Deputy for Collection, as I look out at this incredible enterprise with the responsibility for oversight and how we move this forward, what do we see as the future of the enterprise? The future must be the speed at which we integrate this incredible resource to deliver new advantage for this nation and our allies' leadership in protecting and defending democracy and our citizenry. The speed at which we take these great things that we have developed and braid them together with singular purpose to answer critical questions that are at this nation's doorstep is the way that we will achieve. And it will be the definition of our strategic advantage going forward. We've seen this playing itself out over and over again since 9/11. You've seen it just in looking at the open source enterprise and the way that it's developed. We must be diligent and persevere and continue, challenge ourselves to think and act anew in order to continue the progress and build on that for new results. HUMINT, that which we collect via the humans, right, agents in the field. Technical means, and then open source. And how we looked at how they overlapped and how they worked together. It's not 3 overlapping circles anymore. It's 2 overlapping circles, if you will, the HUMINT and the technical pieces that are operating in an information plane, in an information universe. We can't just limit our thinking to that one simple circle and what we get via just a handful of open sources. We need to think about that great information universe that's out there, how we look at that and take advantage of that, and then look at how then we drill down using some of those other areas, some of those other intelligence disciplines that we have to build on that, to incorporate with that, to get at a different level of information associated with it. And that in the information enterprise...
I warned you I was going to chime in. And I just think it's very interesting on this graph that OSINT is a vital piece of all of those pieces of intelligence. And OSINT is what we're giving them for free, either by commercial means or social media or things you probably don't even think of. Like if you live in the Bay Area, probably how many times you cross the bridge. Open source intelligence becoming a vital role of every piece of intelligence. And that's coming from a guy in this time in 2008 who was in charge of collection. Collection of what? Well, you tell me. Probably collection of everything. Data, strategy, opinions, maybe even legacy UFO programs, and how to collect the data needed to prevent them from being discovered. Just a thought as we watch this.
Elements or a couple of elements in the intelligence community. Across that information universe, we have this open source area that we're looking at as the IC, and then we've got a broader element of this, which is the other elements within the U.S. government. But I've also got another piece on the other side that talks about our need to manage concerns on things like intellectual property, privacy, right, and the policy concerns that exist at each of those boundaries, and maybe some that we haven't even discovered yet. I had a lesson from an earlier job in my operational career where we got into a different type of an operation. We got into some really good information. It was a tremendous amount of information, but we had been treating it much like we had treated a lot of other operations in the way that we were just getting the information in, processing the information, putting that information out. We took one of our conference rooms and turned it into a workroom. Wired it up, and went out across the community and got a handful of top analysts. We wanted some of the top analysts that were out there. In the space of a couple of months, this group started with 6, then it was 15, then it was 25, then we had to cut it because people were waiting to get in the door. People were excited to get in there and see what they could discover. What does that mean in terms of the way our intelligence community develops and moves forward? What does it mean as we move that new group of intelligence professionals into more and more areas of responsibility faster than we ever did ourselves? How do we give them the exposures and the experiences they're absolutely required? How does our ability to work information and think about information differently, to mash up information differently within an intelligence context, provide a new infrastructure for them to lead this community in the 21st century? Think about the information age and all the cultural change that we're going through. We are, by some estimates, 15 years into what is a 30-year change cycle, culturally. Being able to think differently about how we mash up this data becomes incredibly important, not just from the open source perspective, but because it provides an incredible laboratory, that think arena, where we can draw in a much broader section of the open source community and learn what that mashup infrastructure, what else might be done, how we push that. And while we are doing that, we are also within the borders of the classification system and the way we protect sources and methods, the work that we are doing to link the networks, to link information, to link agencies, the infrastructure that we are putting in. What I see is the ability for what we learn in the open source community and the best practices and looking at how we mash up and learn new things from that information and laying it right on top of that new infrastructure that we're building. Now this gang coming along in this first hump, they are the mashup generation, because the internet and things like that to me are a hobby. I don't measure my life experiences by what I learned online with my buds. As we can, as intelligence professionals, work through, do what we can do, and let evolution take care of this. We owe it to this nation. We owe it to our allies. We owe it to the citizenry. We owe it to those young professionals who have chosen a career of service to our country to build that infrastructure, to enable the thinking, to put the pieces in place and let them show us things that we didn't dream were possible moving forward. Sum total of our career is going to be measured by how well we have left the enterprise, how well we have built the enterprise for that next generation to lead against the security threats that face this nation and our allies in the 21st century. It's important for us to remember that we're not bound for our individual idea. We're not bound to our individual program. We're not bound to this agency, this enterprise, this university, this piece. It doesn't matter. We are bound to truth. Ladies and gentlemen, the name of the game today is the same that it has always been. It is the pursuit of truth. We refer to it as intelligence inside this community circle, but that's why we do it. And using that truth for its best for our citizenry. Opportunities to discover and integrate new images and new information from a wider range of sources in near real time. Opportunity to discover new sources of language, thought, cultural perspective, with in situ experience where the action of interest is occurring. Opportunities to look at different in situ actors and their responses to provide new insights. Opportunities to watch how stories develop, deconstruct, and reconstruct between traditional and non-traditional forms of media. Opportunities to discover new approaches, to mash up data, and to deliver new insights. It's an incredible landscape of opportunity that's before us. Right? I am convinced of our continued success because of the talent, the skill, the desire that's represented here in this room. How do you determine which intelligence sources for any given issue?
So this is a little Q&A session with Mr. Glenn, and you can see he's like super fired up. And like I kept thinking, like, where was this excitement coming from? When they start this meeting, the woman that introduces him says like, oh, there's a whole lot of new members to the quote family that have been invited to this event. And I imagine they are talking about the intelligence family. And Mr. Gaffney being in charge of collection and really hitting this open source thing, it got me to thinking, well, in 2007, we had the oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry, y'all. In 2007, we had the release of a device, right? An Apple iPhone. And that device really changed the way that we were using our cell phones, right? All of a sudden, we are browsing, we're getting updates on social media, we're communicating, we're reading the news. We're basically using this device now for everything. And it just, I think, now this is just my own deduction here, is that that's probably why he's so excited. He sees this brand new avenue of data collection that's opened up, where previously it was just on folks' computers, which are much more difficult to really track what they're doing all the time, versus on a mobile device, you just need to get access to that node, right? To that network, and then boom, you got access to everything everyone is doing. So he's very pumped up. And I have to believe that's definitely a part of the reason he is so excited, is because he knows that boatloads of new data are going to start coming in. All right, we're going to let him finish his segment here, the Q&A segment, and then we're going to jump over to Mr. Clapper.
We have a intelligence process that sets out looking at what the gaps are in our understanding about particular issues. That comes from discussions that we have with policymakers, discussions across with other analysts. Those analysts then, based on those discussions and based on their analytic prowess, their ability to understand, identify critical gaps that are out there, and then put those gaps before the collection community and say, what can you do for us? We begin then to evaluate all the different sources that are out there and look at what those different sources can provide. And look then at what the right mix is of those to get the kind of information that we need, right, to address the questions that the analysts are asking. Policy driving the analysis, analysis driving the collection. And it's part of why I talked about how we think about open source. We used to think of it as just one more piece in that puzzle. But I really believe the open source enterprise and the information age gives us a whole new area to think about it and to think about it differently, which is what I based most of my remarks on here today. It says, given how many open source practitioners are out there, how do you determine best of breed? I'm not a good judge. So what I'm interested in is, how do you determine best of breed? How will you, in working together, right, discover new avenues? Because right now there's a lot of different pockets of open source work going on. They may not call it open source work, they just may call it research. But it's going on. How do we discover that? All right, identify it with each other, begin to tie it together, test it, try it, see how it applies, and then build on that. All right? It's not a top-down thing. Can't be. It's got to be by the practitioners themselves. Economically, it's a no-brainer. The partnerships, right, though, and what they can produce, right, going forward, even increase that return on investment. In the information age, we end up with a law of increasing return instead of a law of decreasing return, or so it's been said by some, right? But it's an interesting idea to ponder, right? Just think about it in terms of your cell phones or your email account, right? Now, it's been so long since we've had email, we've forgotten what it was like when we first got it. But when we first got it, a lot of coffee pot and cooler conversations were, do you have email? Oh, you don't have email? You need to have email. It's really great. You do all this stuff. You have that? Why not? Oh, why? Because everybody that I knew that got on email made what I was spending for email suddenly that much more valuable. The law of increasing return associated with being hooked up, wired, and interconnected. Open source provides this incredible laboratory for us to get the best, to begin to look at what that return on investment can really be. And as we look at open source as a primary source of intelligence in certain key areas, not just another source of intelligence, and a primary source not because they're the only ones looking at it, but because we said right up front, we want to go after this using open source. Right. You hear the difference in there? Not the only source by default, the source by design. All right, that's where we need to move. It's where we are moving. All right, it's the way, some of the ways it's being used today. Okay, I've heard you talk about integrated mission management or integrated performance management. How does open source intelligence fit into this framework? I touched on it maybe too briefly as I went through, but as we look at taking all of these elements that we have and getting after critical targets, it's not, it's not a matter of just asking the SIGINT folks or the HUMINT folks or the military folks or, saying, okay, what can you get out of this and let's figure out how we tie it together. That's more of a collaborative piece. I'm talking about integrated planning for a different level of performance. When I say integrated performance, I'm talking beyond collaboration. I'm talking we're purposefully sitting down and saying, let's come up with a new idea, a new way to blend all these pieces and tie it in. And it's not a matter of thinking about that and then going, oh, and what did open source say? And so one of the things that we've done is we've taken some of the open source folks who are on our team and embedded them with our teams who are driving our integrated performance planning.
So welcome, General Clapper. The position of the DNI, as we call him, the Director of National Intelligence, is the senior-most intelligence position in the government. The DNI is, by statute, the head of the 16 different intelligence offices and agencies that make up the intelligence community.
I've served over 46.
Well, it appears I'll have to fix the graphic on the video. But this took place in 2010. The 2008 to the right was from the previous interaction. So this was James Clapper's nomination hearing that took place in 2010. I believe it was August 2010.
Years in the intelligence profession in many capacities. In peace, in crisis, in combat, in uniform, as a civilian, in and out of government, and in academia. I've tried hard to serve in each such capacity with the best interests of our great nation first and foremost. There needs to be a clear, defined, identifiable leader of the intelligence community to exert direction and control over the entirety of that community.
What do you think ought to take precedence? Making sure a defendant's statements can be used in court, or obtaining needed intelligence to thwart future attacks?
Well, obviously my interest, or the interest of intelligence institutionally, is in gaining information.
Do you believe that you would have the authority to overrule the CIA director?
I do. We have contractors who can gain an unfair advantage, and when you're in a situation where the contractor has the monopoly of knowledge, and you don't have the check and balance in your own government workforce, you've got a problem. We do overclassify. I think my observations are that this is more due to just the default. It's the easy thing to do rather than some nefarious motivation to hide or protect things for political reasons. That does happen too, but I think it's more of an administrative default or automaticity to it. If it is for intelligence, now classification.
On intelligence issues.
Yeah, exactly. If it's because it's broader than just intelligence, but certainly if it's intelligence. Yes, I believe ultimately the DNI, if I'm confirmed, is the guy in charge. Or NSA must serve, I believe, as the nation's center of excellence from a technical standpoint on cyber matters. Threat finance is a case in point. She cites, I think, some 51 different organizations that are involved in threat finance. That is a very important tool these days in counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism, weapons of mass destruction. Because it is, in the end, the common denominator is how money works and how money supports these endeavors.
You have been involved, and these are friends of yours, they're individuals that you've worked with, you've associated with, and somewhere along the line, there have been some apparently systemic failures that are going to have to be addressed.
Well, sir, I don't anticipate a problem there.
I have been on this committee for more than a decade now.
Okay, so he doesn't foresee any kind of problem with straightening up folks that need straightening up, regardless of prior relationships. And he does believe that there needs to be a role like DNI that handles all of intelligence. It's almost like a Caesar, right? We faced this great crisis with 9/11, and we decided to have this DNI position that runs all of intelligence. And Caesar never gave the power back. So you wonder if that position is just a permanent position now. But what we've seen so far is James Clapper, Glenn Gaffney, in particular, Stephanie O'Sullivan. We're going to see her here in a minute. But according to multiple sources, as far as we know, these 5, at the very least, are all involved with the legacy UFO program at some capacity. I don't know what that capacity is. I would imagine it has to do with their regular roles. As I stated earlier, you have Clapper, the DNI, you have O'Sullivan managing things. She doesn't have to know the details. She just has to know how to run the programs. And then you have Gaffney collecting just boatloads of open source data that we just give them. So every UFO video you ever posted, every orb video you ever posted, every weird sighting video you ever posted is collected and analyzed, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not. And then you have Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis more on the scientific side of things, sort of pushing this crazy evolutionary science that's going to change, everything, and pushing the boundaries of what we call our norms. This is all the information we have so far. Now, you just heard Clapper say there needs to be a DNI, there needs to be a guy in charge. We know the Patriot Act gave folks in intelligence abilities they did not have before. Like, for instance, listening to every phone call we make as Americans. Reading every text message we make as Americans. And not only that, but our corporations voluntarily providing this information. Like, the government didn't even need a subpoena. AT&T and Verizon, and probably more, just handed the information over. All Uncle Sam had to do was ask. That's your information. So, yes, open source, pivotal. And Gaffney being part of collection, pivotal. O'Sullivan, with her experience in program and project management, pivotal. Clapper being the head of every single intelligence agency out there, pivotal. Now here's Rod Wyden talking to an NSA attorney about how the Patriot Act was used in questionable ways to gather data.
I believe this is the first time we've had the top lawyer at the National Security Agency before the committee in an open session. Would you agree that key portions of the USA Patriot Act have been the subject of significant secret legal interpretations, and that these interpretations are secret today?
The direct answer to your question is that there are provisions of the Patriot Act that are the subject of matters before the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, a court that by design meets in a classified setting, and some of the pleadings and opinions that relate to the Patriot Act that have been part of proceedings before the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court are classified.
Key provisions of the Patriot Act and how they're legally interpreted are being kept secret as of today.
It is certainly fair to say that there are opinions from the court that are classified.
Would you agree that key portions of the FISA Amendments Act of 2008 have been the subject of significant secret legal interpretations, and that those are secret today?
So let me say yes.
So you have said that there are, in fact, secret legal interpretations with respect to both the Patriot Act and the FISA Amendments Act. Do government agencies have the authority to use cell site data to track the location of Americans inside the United States for intelligence purposes.
Senator, I know that that's a question that you've posed to the Director of National Intelligence, Director Clapper. It is a question that is a complicated and difficult question to answer, particularly in this setting. I will say that the intelligence community is working as we speak. I know we've talked to your staff in developing a comprehensive answer to that question, which will be provided to you in writing.
Offers its telephone customers what's called the Share Everything plan. Well, the irony of that did not escape a lot of folks today when it was revealed that Verizon has been sharing the phone records of millions with U.S. intelligence. And sources tell us this evening that surveillance extended to the internet as well.
The National Security Agency, operating under secret court orders to thwart suspected terror plots, was authorized to track calls to and from phone numbers of millions of Americans, even those not tied to terror investigations.
What you're hearing about is the prospect that these could be abused. Now, part of the reason they're not abused is because these checks are in place.
The NSA admitted improperly collecting records on Americans almost 2,800 times in the year ending March 30th, 2012. The NSA says most but not all of the unauthorized surveillance was unintentional and due to human error, such as typing mistakes, but most of those mistakes resulted in the collection of an American's cell phone call, telephone record, internet traffic, or email. The NSA admits it kept more than 3,000 records on Americans that a secret federal court on surveillance called the FISA court had ordered the agency to destroy.
It was more than a year ago, not only here in the United States, but the whole world learned some very startling details about the massive scope of the National Security Agency's surveillance programs. The government cannot just walk in your house and rifle through your drawers and your filing cabinets and your cupboards to see what you might have there without due process of law and search warrants. To what extent does this massive collection of data improve our national security? What cost to our privacy and free expression? If we pick up everything, do we actually have anything?
Take Jackie Combs' question.
Mr. President, could you...
All right, Gabe, but what does this have to do with UFO legacy programs? I'm glad you asked. By providing these provisions, by providing these extra layers of intelligence and these freedoms of the intelligence agency to act as they believe they must to protect us from terrorism, and the law kind of comes in secondary. It was a fantastic opportunity for the government to take everything they had in the legacy UFO program and make sure it was buried so deep we would never, ever find it. And that's probably why it will take a whistleblower to find this stuff out. It will take someone with some steel balls to come forward and say, this is where it's at. This is how you get it. And I think we all will be blown away when we see that file. But no president yet has been willing to share it. And we don't know if they've gotten the full briefing or like the half briefing, but nobody yet. Even Jimmy Carter, who said, he believed in aliens. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. Barack Obama. And now Trump, who said he was going to share the real deal. It's been nope, nope, nope every time. There's probably good reason for that. But I'm not going to speculate on what it is. So the NSA gets busted for listening to millions of Americans. Some wrists get slapped, but ultimately the administration is able to talk their way out of it for the most part. Even after this insane violation of our privacy.
Could you please react to the reports of secret government surveillance of phones and internets? And can you also assure Americans that the government, your government, doesn't have some massive secret database of all their personal online information and activities?
Yeah. When it comes to telephone calls, nobody is listening to your telephone calls. That's not what this program's about. This program, by the way, is fully overseen not just by Congress, but by the FISA court. If anybody in government wanted to go further than just that top-line data and wanted to, for example, listen to Jackie Combs' phone call, they'd have to go back to a federal judge, just like they would in a criminal investigation. So I want to be very clear. Some of the hype that we've been hearing over the last day or so, nobody's listening to the content of people's phone calls.
The government had failed to cite a single instance in which analysis of the NSA's bulk metadata actually stopped an imminent attack. Are you able to identify any specific examples when it did so? Are you convinced that the collection of that data is useful to national security? It should continue as it is.
The NSA, in executing this program, believed, based on experiences from 9/11, that it was important for us to be able to track if there was a phone number of a known terrorist outside of the United States calling into the United States.
So they keep referring to metadata. And I want to pose this question. Once you put a video up of a strange sighting and you type the word sighting or UFO or UAP or orb, do you think that gets compiled with all this other metadata and comes up as a file on whatever they decide to name it? I bet you there's a command line right now in our government intelligence software for doing just that.
States where that call might have gone. The question we're going to have to ask is, can we accomplish the same goals that this program is intended to accomplish in ways that give the public more confidence that, in fact, the NSA is doing what it's supposed to be doing.
And the FISA law does not specify whether a warrant is required. So that's the reason that I'm asking the question. I asked it a year ago.
I'd like to ask Director Mueller to help me with that question.
And Mr. Director, I'm anxious to hear from Director Mueller, who I greatly respect, but I also need to hear from you with respect to the intelligence community. That's why I asked it a year ago.
As I said, Senator Wyden, in the case of CIA and NSA, who were engaged in foreign intelligence collection, that's a practice they do not engage in.
What I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
The solution is simple. Bring the Air Force leadership to the Hill and compel them to divulge the data General Clapper referred to alongside any other pertinent UAP information.
The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, calls me
Mike, I need you to go through all of it. I need the team to go through all of NSA's holding all of its files, and I need everything that you have on UFOs. And I'm like, what, sir? Really, there are phenomena occurring out there that both are visible and that we can't explain. I don't know what causes them. I don't know what they are. I don't know why.
Well, first, I think it is kind of, there is logic to the intelligence community addressing this. Whenever we witness such phenomenon that it is recorded and documented, I don't know why we haven't been more transparent about it in the past, and I'm part of that crime, I guess. And my former capacities were, I didn't insist on more transparency with respect to this issue. I think it speaks to the breadth of the challenges that the intelligence community has, and specifically Gabriel Haynes. And I think this is why it's not a bad idea the intelligence community be in charge of gathering whatever data there is. There was an active program to track anomalous activities that we couldn't otherwise explain, many of them connected with ranges out west, notably Area 51.
So it's clear that he knows about the issue, that he has not been a proponent of declassifying data and releasing information. And what better benefit for a UFO gatekeeper than to be in control of the entire intelligence apparatus? Now we're going to see what David Grush has to say about what Clapper just said, that he was involved in a program and they traced some things out west by Area 51. In that movie, Age of Disclosure, apparently that's about all he said. So that left a bad taste in Grush's mouth. So we're going to hear Grush's response to that, and also the first mention of Stephanie O'Sullivan as being involved in these legacy programs.
I'm a little bit disappointed as a fellow Air Force officer, and certainly General Clapper rose to the ranks as 3-star general. That's all he said in the documentary, that was a program he was aware of. In fact, without being inappropriate, I will say that General Clapper was well aware of the crash retrieval issue, managed the crash retrieval issue, and when he was the DNI, USDI, and DIA director, he placed people in critical roles to manage this issue, both publicly and I'll just say non-publicly as well. General Clapper, Stephanie O'Sullivan, other folks in the IC that are well aware of this issue, that were in rooms discussing this issue. I ask you to be greater leaders on this. I should not be the only former military officer and intelligence official that is being completely candid with the information that they were exposed to.
Once again, James Clapper understates what he knows and what he's done.
So I will.
Okay. Now, this is a recent statement Michael Herrera made, calling out Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis for being involved in legacy programs, but he also states something interesting, that they're being blackmailed somehow. Take this for what it is. This was a statement from, again, Michael Herrera, the Marine whistleblower who saw the craft in South America, the black UFO-looking craft that appeared to be getting loaded up with something. And then we're going to meet Stephanie O'Sullivan. And one thing I want you to really listen to is all of the programs, including contractor programs, that Stephanie O'Sullivan was involved in.
Say, Eric Davis is being blackmailed, and as well as Hal Puthoff's being threatened. Because if this leaks, then it'll kind of narrow down to who in the group of people that I'm working with who know them personally will, and it's like It's a bunch of people who know these two personally. So I try to be transparent as much as I can with one, not jeopardizing the people I'm talking to, and keeping them safe was most important. Because without these people, we don't have anything to stand on, and that's the truth. What I will say with Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff, I know this personally, is that they are legacy program assets. So they will mix truths with lies. So you got to be careful with what they say and produce.
She currently serves in a role similar to that of a chief operating officer, where she focuses on the operations of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and manages the intelligence community coordination and information sharing. Prior to becoming Associate Deputy Director of CIA, Ms. O'Sullivan spent 4 years leading the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, the part of the agency responsible for developing and deploying innovative technology in support of the intelligence collection and analysis mission.
It's an honor to be here representing the intelligence community and the Director of National Intelligence. 3 decades ago, when I was new to the intelligence community, I don't think this is something that I could have imagined myself doing. When I started out in the IC, I literally did not know what to expect. I saw an ad for an ocean engineer at TRW, the company that was later bought by Northrop Grumman. The ad was remarkably short on any details, and that's how my career in the IC started, as an engineer designing high-tech and highly classified systems for the Navy. And then years later, when I moved to CIA, my first boss made me a promise. He said that I would never be bored.
TRW to Northrop Grumman, designing advanced systems for underwater, or advanced underwater systems, however you want to word it. Then, essentially recruited into the CIA.
At CIA, we built some amazing technologies and participated in critical missions. And over the course of my career, I went from building technology systems to building small teams who built technology systems and building much larger organizations at CIA and now at ODNI. A little more than 4 years ago, I accepted Jim Clapper's offer to be his Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, which is bridging that joint action gap that the 9/11 Commission identified. And that responsibility goes way, way beyond just getting the intelligence agencies to talk to each other. It's about helping them to recognize the cultural strengths and capabilities of each of the 17 elements of the intelligence community and bring them to the table, and then getting them to think as a community. For me, after 30 years of work at TRW, with the Office of Naval Intelligence and in CIA, I saw just how important it was that we get this right. So I jumped at the chance to be at the center of that work and to work for Jim Clapper. I've worked on the design and deployment of some pretty amazing systems and led teams that put incredible technology into operations. Director Clapper says that talking to Congress in the open about classified matters while trying to protect intelligence sources is one of his favorite things to do. It is an honor to appear before you today as the President's nominee to be the position of Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. I have served in private industry, the Department of Defense, and the Central Intelligence Agency. I have delivered systems and new capabilities in every intelligence discipline. I have worked across the intelligence cycle from research to operations, and I have worked across the intelligence community in partnerships that delivered more than either of us could have alone. I fully comprehend both the challenge and the grave responsibility bestowed upon the Director of National Intelligence, and if confirmed, would strive to meet both the challenges and fulfill the responsibilities of the office. I look forward to supporting Director Clapper's goals to better integrate the intelligence community and to ensure that the community is efficient in both its structure and its operations. If confirmed, I will ensure that the Intelligence Committee is meeting its statutory obligations to fully and currently inform the Congressional Oversight Committees of Intelligence Activities.
On August 20th, D&I Clapper established the position of Deputy Director of National Intelligence as the new third-ranking position in the Office of D&I, and he eliminated the 4 deputy D&I positions that had existed previously. Will you make reducing the use of contractors within the IC a priority if confirmed?
Madam Chairman, if confirmed, I would pledge to take a very close look at those contracts.
So this is interesting, and the reason I left it in is because I do think there's relevance here. that once Clapper took over as DNI, he eliminated the 4 deputy DNIs, essentially the people there to help and keep them in check and help them balance everything, and only put up this one confirmation, Stephanie O'Sullivan. So limiting the power even more to where it's all coming back to him, or at least more of it is coming directly back to him, and having to deal with less scrutiny from other deputies.
The key word in that my response was surge use. That does not mean sustained forever. The contractors bring unique and valuable skills, and they fill surge needs. But we should take a look at it periodically on an ongoing basis to make sure that they are not just continuing out of inertia.
Let me just express a concern that has been brought up from time to time since the creation of the DNI. It's something you and I talked about a little bit yesterday, and that's the size of the DNI. I don't want to put you in a position of saying the DNI is too big or not big enough, but certainly one of the problems that we've had in the intelligence community is sometimes wading through the bureaucracy. And I would just urge you that in your position as General Clapper's right-hand person, that you look at the size and the scope of the work being done by the DNI, and if we can, from the policy side, help make decisions and work with you with regard to either trimming it down or making it more efficient, I just urge you to think outside the box and let us help you do that. Lastly, since the Wikileaks disclosure began, the tug between the need to know versus the need to share has come under increased scrutiny. What are the key factors that you believe should be considered in resolving this tension between need to know and need to share?
Need to share and need to know are not and cannot be mutually exclusive for the intelligence community. We definitely have intelligence sources that must be protected. Lives are indeed at stake. We also cannot afford to give up the gains that we have made, the very real gains we have made via deeper integration and sharing that we've had since 9/11. That has been important to keeping our country safe, and it has really, truly meant that we were able to do things that we weren't in the past. The DNI's role is that of setting standards, making best practices move between organizations, doing common training, and sharing the skills that we have across the community. It's a valuable role, and it needs to be there. We also need the DNI's function, and we've had it for a long time in the community and in the body of the NIC, to integrate analysis that comes from all the disparate and different skill sets of the community, an imagery analyst piece versus a SIGINT analyst piece versus what would come from an all-source analyst or a military analyst. To get the full picture for intelligence, somebody needs to integrate that. And the DNI has picked up that ongoing community responsibility. I do not believe that they have added unnecessarily to it.
Is we're asked to do oversight on the intelligence community. In most cases, we're denied access to raw data. I would ask you, if confirmed today, would you do everything you can in the instances that we feel we need the raw data as a committee to be supplied the raw data to do our oversight job?
I would indeed, if confirmed, pledge to do everything possible to get the information that you need to do your job to the best of my ability. Now, I understand that there are sometimes competing jurisdictions across committees and that the raw information may fall into that bucket. But again, I would pledge to do everything possible to make this committee's role of oversight of intelligence effective.
I would hope with the coordinating role that you see Director Clapper in, that he could overcome those territorial boundaries and make sure, especially within the IC community, that we had the tools we needed to make.
Director Clapper is quite persuasive. The men and women of the intelligence community are responsible for informing policymakers and the decisions that they have to make. We are committed to providing the most fulsome views to those policymakers, including all of the footnotes, including all the debates.
Really one main question. How would you assess the state of affairs in collecting and analyzing intelligence from detainees that we're capturing around the world?
I believe that we're doing across the community, including with our partnerships with DOD and law enforcement, that we're getting the best access to the information we can. When we can get access to people, we are getting the information we need. The capabilities and tools that we have are effective in supporting that.
What's the role of the DNI in all this? When the DNI, for example, lays out certain priorities for intelligence collection and analysis, how will you expect the various agencies to react?
The DNI has a very critical role. The DNI adjudicates between competing requirements and then allocates resources aligned to those top priority requirements. And the classic example you just laid out is one that we frequently wrestle with, which is how do we cover the whole world and maintain the crisis collection and assessments on ongoing and unfolding events.
The Congress created the position of DNI so that there'd be somebody who was responsible for looking across all of the various intelligence agencies to make sure the enterprise was as effective as possible. And one of the questions that those of us on the committee ask every time we confirm a new director or a deputy director of national intelligence is how well is the concept working? So from your vantage point as a senior manager at the CIA, how well is the concept of a director of national intelligence working in practice?
I can tell you unequivocally, as a member of the senior management team at CIA, that we are fully on board with the DNI's leadership and vision for the community. It resonates with us. His vision, with all the men and women in the community, it resonates. His vision focused on mission and integration works. It makes sense to everyone. We went through a lot of stand-up pains in the community. But in my assessment and my experience over the last year or so, and especially as Director Clapper has come on and laid out his vision, I believe that most of that is behind us.
And what is the principal mission of the DNI?
To protect our country.
To protect our country. And the DNI's unique role in that is what?
The DNI has the responsibility of integrating the community. He has a responsibility of being an intelligence advisor to the President, carrying forward all the information that the intelligence community brings. He has the responsibility of making sure that the intelligence community acts in compliance with the laws and the Constitution and values of our country, as well as making sure that all of the intelligence community keeps Congress and our oversight committees completely and currently informed.
I think we discussed yesterday, I sit on the Armed Services Committee and have an interest in that interaction between the intelligence community and the military, particularly outside of war zones. I believe there's some need to clarify those relationships. Do you think that there are areas where we need new guidelines or new agreements between the IC and the, I'll use some more acronyms, the DOD, intelligence community, and the Department of Defense?
I believe that particularly in war zones, we operate quite effectively together, largely because our combined and joint mission is so clear. There aren't competing requirements. We're all pointing at the same thing. As far as additional guidance or structures, the DNI has worked very closely with the DOD and the SecDef to set up a number of bodies to work through CONOPS, policy, resource allocation, requirements allocation. So all of those lower level structures are being put in place to make sure that we work as effectively back here as we do out in the field.
Well, let me move to energy security. I think in your written response you mentioned energy security along with climate change is concerns that would have national security implications.
Our analysis of the trends and the instability and impacts includes economic indicators. Energy security is a huge driver of that. It underlies a lot of the decisions and risks that are made and trade decisions that are made as we go forward. The analysts in the community have stood up, all of them have long-term strategic analysis plans that include looking at those longer-term issues, such as energy security, and including climate change, for which we've stood up a climate change center. The advantage goes to the attacker in the cyber world. The IC in this endeavor has some very unique skills and capabilities that we can contribute.
So there you have it. Part 1 in my episode of Legacy UFO Gatekeepers. As I said, this isn't starting in the 40s, or some would argue it should have started in the late 30s because of what happened in Italy. This is starting when I believe we were able to take these old UFO legacy programs that were probably becoming a little in fear between FOIA and just people in their deathbed confessions and people coming out, that some of these things would get out and this legacy program could be exposed. 9/11 and what happened with 9/11 of the Patriot Act expanded secrecy. So it didn't cause the legacy UFO programs to happen. And I'm not saying by any means that 9/11 was somehow planned so that they could pull off this operation. What I'm saying is it was probably exploited, right? The additional secrecy, the additional powers that these folks had was exploited to take these legacy programs and bury them even deeper. Because 9/11, it didn't just change security. It changed how the government actually hides things. We had emergency powers that normalized actions that would have never passed during peacetime. For instance, the D&I position to begin with and the Patriot Act itself. And while they have made attempts to ramp down the Patriot Act, they're never going to get rid of it. My mom told me something when I was young I didn't quite understand, and I got to understand as I grew older. You give the government an inch, they take a mile, and they never, ever, ever give it back. The powers of the Patriot Act became too internally important to our intelligence community to do their job to give it up ever again. They're always going to want that tool. Do you ever think the government will ever roll back to post 9/11 powers? Do you think they'll say, hey, a terrorism thing, we think we might have it licked for the most part, so we're going to go ahead and undo the Patriot Act and give citizens all of their rights back? Do you foresee that happening anytime soon? "9/11 and the Patriot Act expanded surveillance authorities. It broadened intelligence sharing inside the government, not with the public. So when you heard the stories about, oh, the FBI and the CIA just couldn't talk to each other, now they can. And it has nothing to do with the general public. It lowered the threshold for classification under national security claims. So you could now classify everything. The Patriot Act, it didn't need to mention UFOs. It created legal and bureaucratic cover that could be applied anywhere. It could be UFOs. It could be directed energy weapons. You can run it under that same classification system. They do talk about accountability to the Congress and the Senate. But as you saw in those videos, it seems the most they can do is ask tough questions that at the very worst, the person would have to plead the fifth. And then maybe if you can find some kind of illegal activity, you can get them into court. Before 9/11, special access programs already existed. But after 9/11, they became more compartmentalized, more contractor-driven, which is why we hear them asking Mrs. O'Sullivan about contractor work, and why we had the whole incident with Mr. Snowden. And this also makes it further removed from any kind of congressional visibility. So these are things that we need to think about, because this is what the legacy UFO program is today. It's no longer a couple of Air Force captains and an underground base at Area 51 that people will debate all day whether that's real or not. The real program that we know of, that we know is out there today, is so compartmentalized, so buried because of the Patriot Act, that it's not even possible to get some of this data through the Freedom of Information Act because of the Patriot Act. All right, well, this was part one of my series on these legacy UFO programs, starting in the middle. We're going to go forward and we're going to go backwards. But I think right now the middle is the best place to start, because this, when you look around at the situation that's currently going on, this is the reality that we're in. 9/11 was over 20 years ago, but we are still living in a post 9/11 world when it comes to classification and the brazen rights of our intelligence community. And we see that by Trump simply declaring drug runners as terrorists. Our military is now able to target civilian boats and blow them out of the ocean. Forget international law. They're terrorists. And that's all fine and dandy when it's an actual terrorist. But what happens when it's not? These are things we need to contemplate. We are supposed to be better, even if it doesn't feel good sometimes. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. I want to thank you all for hanging out with me and checking out this episode of the Gabriel Speaks Podcast. I'll probably edit this one down and put a new version on my actual podcast on Spotify, and then a new version on YouTube, so you can check that out as well. Maybe add and take some things away. But thanks so much for hanging out, y'all. I really, truly appreciate it. I hope you have a great evening. We'll see you next time.